to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the Sarah Jane Series 2 adventure, The Mark of the Berserker. Written by Joseph Libster and is directed by Joss Agnew. This is a story that mainly focuses on the character of Clyde, but also as well, most notably, is that it's a Sarah Jane light adventure, very similar to whatever happened to Sarah Jane the previous season. So that's some really nice little detail. We get to learn a lot about Clyde's home life in this story, so that's very unique. And there's a lot of little references to previous stories and Doctor Who as a much wider canon. So that's some really cool stuff. But what's cool for me anyway, because I really like this aspect. So if you don't want any spoilers, turn away now. This story has appearances from Maria and Alan. This would be their final story for the entire series of Sarah Jane, which is a bit of a shame. And though their role is prominent for the most part, it is really cool to see them, even though their role is mainly in part 2. In fact, I don't think they appear until part 2. So that is some really interesting stuff with this story. In terms of the opinions of wide roles, because before I make these videos I always look around for people's opinions just so I can compare them with my own, as I always like to do. This story is a very, very popular story, and it is considered by many as one, maybe not the best, but one of the best Sarah Jane adventure episodes of the series. Some might even say it's the best story in this season. So, some really cool stuff. I want to say this story had won an award for its excellent work, but I think I might be mixing it up with a different episode later down in the entire series of Sarah Jane. But who knows? But anyway, no, I'm not very good at remembering. I do apologise. But yeah, so it's a very popular story. Watching this for the marathon was actually the first time I've ever watched this story, so I was really looking forward to it. I was hoping that it wouldn't disappoint. Holy hell, this story is awesome. It might even come down as my second favourite Sarah Jane story so far, which is kind of funny because at the moment it means my two favourite Sarah Jane adventure episodes is where Sarah Jane is hardly in them, which is a real shame. It is a real shame. The ones with Sarah Jane as a prominent role are mainly silly runarounds, and it's only when she is taken out of the story for the majority of the plot is that something that the characters deal with, because it focuses more on the younger characters. So anyway, the story kicks off in the pre-credit sequence in easily one of the greatest scary moments of Sarah Jane so far. Basically, Rani, played by the amazing Angela Mahindra, she looks through one of the doors in the school where she sees that this boy, who is usually this very kind and compassionate boy, at least from what we're told by one of the teachers, is in there for being grounded. He's in detention, and these kids start picking on him, saying that he's a freak, what a weirdo. And we notice that he's got this this medallion, and it's giving him this mark on his hand. And this boy starts becoming aggressive, and he tells the bully character to shut up and not keep quiet. Where to then the character then tries to talk, and he literally can't like get words out. He's just like mouthing. He's like, and Ronnie's just watching this and kind of terrified, and the teacher's just like, what the hell is going on? This isn't funny. Stop this like joke, this game. And then this boy then he turns to the teacher and tells him to shut up, to which then the teacher also can't get a word out. He starts mouthing as well, so he's like, he physically cannot get words out. And his kid then sees that Ronnie is looking through the window, and so he runs out and pushes out the way and goes through the corridor, as Maria then turns to the teacher, who is like, you can see it in his mouth actions that he is screaming for help, but literally there are no words coming out. He's like, and that is terrifying. That is a really cool moment. Joseph Libster is really good at playing these small little terrible horror beats into his narratives. And Josh Agnew, who previously directed the last Sontaran, if I remember correctly, does have a sort of quality of a little horror dipped into his stories, in terms of the Sarah Jane adventure. So it looks nice, it's paced nice, just a great way of just getting into the story. I know it is a shame that this story isn't really a horror story. I think there is an aspect to this story which is just great material for a genuine horror story in Sarah Jane. Sadly, this would not be it, because this does take a much lighter tone throughout the rest of the story. But still, a really great way to open the adventure. The story then follows Rani for the most part, as she confronts this boy. He basically drops this medallion and Maria picks it up. She then goes home and tries to like discover what this is, but also, you know, just talk to her dad. We learn that her mother is off somewhere. I don't know what happened, whether the actress was just not available for this story. But at the moment, it's just her and her father. And we quickly learn that there is, this medallion has abilities. The ability to control people, because they have this discussion about food. And the father wants to cook, but Rani doesn't. She wants to order out, and he's like, all right, okay. And she asks them for Chinese, knowing that her father doesn't like Chinese, but her father that agrees. And she kind of quickly realizes that it's the medallion's power and that it'll do everything that she asks. And I love this scene because it's just so amusing for the start, and you see Rani just like just absolutely having a ball of controlling her father, and also her headmaster, I'd like to say as well, as he makes her, she makes him like hop on one leg and get on the floor, pretend to be a chicken, that kind of stuff, and she's just laughing her head off. And she says like this quote, it's like, I could kill you sometimes. And the father just stops laughing, stops the humour, turns to Rani and is just like, you want me to die? And Rani is just like, she quickly realises, holy hell, this might be a bit too powerful for me. So she is just like, no, nobody, forget everything that's just happened. And then he's like, what the hell am I doing on the floor and stuff? And so Rani takes the medallion and tries to take it to Sarah Jane's. Now, Sarah Jane is actually off doing other things. Earlier on in the episode, we see that she is actually going on a journalist. She's doing something for a job, or at least that's what she claims. We do get a scene later on in which it turns out she's fighting some sort of alien So I don't know what's happening with the whole. Is she an actual journalist? Is she still working for UNIT as an ambassador for Earth? We don't really know, but that's not important. But anyway, she's actually given Luke. Luke is actually having a sleepover over Clyde's house. This is the first time that we actually get Clyde. His home life. We get interaction with his mother, and I like how Luke is mostly silent through this. It's mainly just to show Clyde's life and just Clyde's environment in his own, outside of all the epic adventures and stuff. And this scene is just really great at building up Clyde as a character. If this is the only story that you're going to watch, we learn that that his father isn't around, that his father just abandoned him and probably is no different from being dead to Clyde at this point, and that he needs his mum, and his mum is kind of embarrassing to him, but Clyde has always been this jokey character, and that does lead into some really great humorous moments. This story is incredibly funny. It's easily the most laughs I've had from any Sarah Jane Adventure episode, and for Doctor Who for a while, this has been a really amusing story. I especially like Luke and Clyde's reaction, their dynamic just before they go to bed, and Clyde's mother, is shouting him through the door. And it really reminds me of when I was a kid and I had these kind of sleepovers where Luke is like, good night, Mrs. whatever her last name is, because it's not Clanger, like Clyde is. And she's like, don't call me that, just call me by my first name. And then Clyde says good night and calls her by her first name, and she's just like, oh, you stop being cheeky, you. Now go to sleep. And they have these small little banters, which really just shows the friendship between them two. We also learn that Clyde is really interested in art. He does a lot of drawing, a lot of comic bookish style artwork. I don't know if that plays later on in the series, but here it's just kind of brought up. I like that it is just kind of brought up because, it's something about him, but you don't need to expand everything that he does. There's a much more interesting dynamic story here. And so, for the most part in part one, we just get this light-hearted feel to this story as we have all of these characters interacting. And then there's a knock at the door in the morning after, and Clyde then goes to see the door, and who is out at the door but Clyde's father. And we have this really awkward, in universe awkward now, not like watching it awkward, interaction between the family. And I like how Luke's just like witnessing this, because he basically learns like how normal life is through Clyde. And I like how he does say stuff, but it's in small beats, and you can see in Tommy Knight's performance that he is very in observation mode. He is just looking around and seeing what's happening between all of our characters and stuff. Now, Clyde is played by Daniel Anthony. This is easily, by far, this scene where he's confronting his father, is probably one of the best scenes that he has ever done for the series. It's easily the best scene he's done so far in the series, where that quirky persona, that silly jokester that we are so used to, just gets dropped. And he goes into this really serious demeanor where he's basically talking to his father. He's standing up for his father and is basically like, I don't need you. You just disappeared and left without a trace. And and Mum has been looking after me, and she is this amazing person, and I got this friend, I got Luke, so I don't really need you. But slowly the father is kind of like, not like warming him up at the moment, but is trying to convince him that maybe they should start a relationship again. And so Clyde is kind of thinking about it. He does kind of want it, but he knows that his father, there's a huge chance that his father will disappoint him again. And the fact, that the drop in the Clyde that we're used to, and we see this, and I love there's a little bit of dialogue where it's like, Clyde is a humorous character to try and distract himself from the pain of losing his father. And it cuts to Luke's reaction, and you know what that is implying, and this realization to Luke, and the shots here, the acting, just everything about this scene. Easily my favourite scene so far in the Sarah Jane adventures. Josh Agnew's directing here is phenomenal. He has really boosted up his performance since his last directed duty in The Last Sontaran. So right off the bat, like, it was great that they got him to return and got this really powerful moment. But basically the father does convince Luke to have this another meeting where they go outside, out from the influence of the mother and Luke. And so they go and in this park, whilst Rani tries to get the medallion back to Sarah Jane's house or try and contact Mr. Smith. But Mr. Smith is inactive, making this the only story in the Sarah Jane adventures where Mr. Smith isn't in it at all. Although we do get like this voice message from him with Sarah basically explaining that Sarah Jane is doing journalist work. If there's anything alien, just drop it. Just don't get involved. Don't want any hassle when I'm not involved. And so Rani decides to leave the medallion there, and she's constantly thinking about it. She draws it, and she confronts her father about it, saying, she confronts it. Basically, she's like, there's something really important, and I feel like I need Sarah Jane's help, but I feel like as well that I could do this on my own, this mysterious thing that she won't tell her father about. What should I do? And the father is basically like, go do it. Go do some research on what you're trying to discover, what you want. And so she, with the help of Luke, tries to find out where they got this medallion and where the kid found this medallion and how it got brought up, and if there's any alien interaction on at the moment. And their research takes them to this alleyway where there's nothing really remarkable there, so they decide basically to head back to Bannerman Road. But Clyde has basically had this like small little interaction with his father where they've kind of bonded a bit, and Clyde really wants to basically impress his father to a point where he's basically wants to show him that he is doing great without the father. And so he basically tells his father that he saves the world on numerous occasions, and that what he does with Sarah Jane, and he doesn't believe him. So Clyde actually takes his father to Sarah Jane's attic, where Clyde's father picks up the medallion. And we get this really great interaction. Again, this story does some really great humorous moments, which because of the realization of how serious things take, makes you kind of feel bad that you laughed in the first place. Essentially, Clyde basically shows him all some of these gizmos and gadgets, and Clyde's father starts to believe, and he picks up the medallion, and he doesn't really know what it does. at the moment. And when they go down outside, they get confronted by Rani's father, who is basically like talking to him, he's investigating them because he doesn't believe that Clyde and Clyde's father are innocent. Clyde makes his excuses like, why are you in Sarah Jane's house? You know she's not here. Oh, we were watering the plants. That's strange because Rani was told to also water the plants. Yeah, there's a lot of plants. And Clyde's father basically tells Rani's father to run on the spot, to which he then runs on the spot, and then tells Rani's father to do sit-ups. And he basically quickly realizes what is going on, and Clive becomes really has this massive bond with his father. Whether that's due to the medallion's influence, we're not quite sure. But anyway, he starts getting the mark, and the more he's using it, the more this mark becomes bigger onto his arm, and seemingly is influencing him to become a little bit more aggressive person. Now, Rani and Luke arrive, seeing what's happening with Rani's father, and is just like, Clyde, what the hell are you doing? Your father has done something. You're not supposed to let your father up into the attic. You can know what trouble it's caused. He must have taken something. And Clyde's like, how dare you accuse my father? But my father is doing sit-ups being controlled by your father. Do you think that's not a coincidence at all? And this leads into probably my favourite cliffhanger of Series 2 so far, because there's nothing really dramatic. There's no, you're going to die any second now. But in terms, because we've known these characters, and this story does a great job at setting up these characters if you just want to watch this story on its own. It does, this cliffhanger is really powerful, where Clyde's father basically is like, you know what? I want you to forget everything you know about Luke and Rani. And then Clyde basically starts walking off, and Rani and Luke are just like, wait, Clyde, don't go. Clyde turns around and says, sorry, do I know you? Who are you? That is some really powerful stuff. That is going to be easily one of the best cliffhangers of the series. So part 2, the story then is mainly focused, like in the last story in the Sarah Jane Adventures, Secret of the Stars. This story is set up in a way where the big action, the main focal point of the narrative, the plot, happens in part 2, with part 1 mainly being set up. But unlike Secret of the Stars, where the story felt way too focused on the action in part 2, which left very little to do with character, here we really have this, we do have a plot which allows our characters to still have some really great breathing time. And essentially Luke's father has kidnapped Clive, without them knowing it, because, he's influenced by the medallion. And we basically see Clyde's father basically becoming more and more aggressive. Whether it's due to the medallion, we don't know. But because from what we can gather from this character, he seems like the type of person who would want to control Luke as best as possible. And there's all of these small beats, these small little moments which kind of get you into the mindset of the characters. There's a bit where Clyde's father gets a call from Mel, his current partner, and it's actually Clyde's auntie, but he hangs up. And he basically tries to buy Clyde all of these stuff. He tells Clyde to forget his mother. So when his mum rings him and it comes up on his phone, call from mum, he doesn't even know what a mother is. He's like, Dad, what's a mum? That's really bloody disturbing. But Rani and Luke, they have no idea what to do. I mean, Clyde is under the influence of this alien device, and they don't even know what it is. So they need help, and Sarah Jane isn't around. But Luke has an idea. He's going to phone a friend. This is where we cut into America, and we see none other than Maria and Alan return. As I stated, this is the last time they would appear in the store in any Sarah Jane, which is a shame because they're really great characters in my opinion. Doing some research, I've discovered that Maria isn't a popular character. I don't know why. I think she has some. I think she's a really nice character, and I like her dynamic with Sarah Jane. But Sarah Jane doesn't get any interaction. In fact, I don't think she knew that Maria's even interacts in this story. So, who knows? But they call up Maria, and there's this really nice beat. And I like how in part 2, it's not a fleeting cameo. They do have a prominent role in the story to a regret. Not to a regret, what's the word I'm looking for? To a descent. Where, you know, because they're in America, they're not actually interacting into the story, but they do rely really information onto our characters, where Luke actually asks Alan's help because he's a computer hacker person, and he basically asks him to hack into UNIT. I love the small interaction where Maria's just like, UNIT is an alien military force. They basically defend the world from aliens, and there's this secret organization. And Alan's just like, I'm not even gonna bother asking how you knew all that. Yeah, the identity of UNIT as this secret organization and a public organization has always been something which is doesn't really mix up well in the canonicity of Doctor Who. Sometimes it's like no one must even know we're here, and then other times they're walking around with these big logos, going around and people introducing themselves as UNIT. It's kind of funny if you ask me. And so they basically learn that this medallion is a mark of a Berserker, a device which is actually used by an ancient race of aliens many centuries ago, which was the inspiration for Norse mythology, basically stating that Norse mythology is real to a descent. And it turns out that in the mythology, basically these berserkers are warriors that basically are fueled with rage, even sometimes attacking their own allies because they're just so filled up with rage, and they would wear animal skins. But in the Doctor Who universe, they basically get this medallion which allows them to influence people around them, but it makes them more aggressive, it makes them more agitated and more focused on being this sort of angry warrior. And those animal skins descriptions aren't actually real. It's that the people get turned into monsters that are unrecognizable as human beings, and that this is going to happen to Clyde's father if he keeps using the medallion. So there's this race against time, and they need to track him down. So they get Alan to track Clyde's phone so they can follow him, as Rani is like, right, we have no other option, we have no choice. My father's influenced by Clyde's father to constantly do press-ups, and he just won't stop. Sarah Jane isn't around, we need to go to Clyde's mother. And then she becomes interested in the story, and I like her concern in this story, that, you know, she really genuinely, because from her point of view, she doesn't know about aliens, she just thinks that Clyde's father has kidnapped him. And this all comes down to a scene in which they're on the docks, because Clyde's father basically is like, right, I promised you I was going to take you around the world, that's what I'm going to do. Me and you are going to go around the world, just the two of us. But the story, again, does allow for great character beats. There's a great moment where Clyde's father can see that there's something bothering him, despite, you know, him forgetting his mother, forgetting who his past life is, and is basically now in his father's influence. and Clyde, he basically forces Clyde to tell him what's bothering him, to which Clyde is like, why did you left me all those years ago? 5 years ago, you left me to be with somebody in Germany, and now, like, I can't forget it. I can't, and Clyde's father does kind of apologise. He does, you can see that maybe he's not a great person, because he's at least trying. I don't know if that justifies his character, but the fact that you can see him trying is something that is, important to the story. And I do really like that before Clyde's father then just makes Clyde forget about the 5 years, that they've always been this team, this group, and the Mark takes its influence more. So we get to this conclusion where all of our characters now are met up by the docks, and it turns out that there was somebody else, that Alan has actually got in contact with someone to help with the situation back in the UK, because they can't get anywhere. So as he's influenced someone's computer, and right out the bat, out of nowhere, Sarah Jane appears. That is really cool. And because at the moment Clyde's father didn't say anything about Sarah Jane, Clyde actually remembers Sarah Jane, and is just like, Sarah Jane, thank God you're here. I don't know what's happening. Something's wrong with my father. He's having some sort of like a heart attack. And these people have turned up. His own mother, Luke and Ronnie, and he has no idea who they are. And Sarah Jane is kind of like piecing together. Now, as much as I love this story as at the moment, I will admit, with the scene, the climax of this story does kind of fall flat by the performance of the father's character when the influence is taking him over. And he's got these really cool light blue veins, and he's got glowing like white eyes. But I feel like that scene isn't as strong as it should be, as you got the father kind of doing the classic, Clyde, he is mine, he will be a perfect warrior, there is no Clyde's father in me, I'm only a warrior, I must do the warrior thing, I felt that really took me out of the experience, which is a shame, because I was really enjoying the story up to this point. But Sarah Jane basically is like, your father is turning into something, and he needs to remember who he was. And so Clyde is like, he basically tries to get his father to remember stuff that they've done with, and so does Clyde's mother. And so he starts having flashbacks. And I like how sometimes you get flashbacks to scenes that we've already had, but some shots are actually a POV shot of him, like when Clyde opens the door earlier on in the episode. And we also get some scenes of Clyde as a baby and him spending time with Clyde's mother. And so the influence is gone off him, and he gives Clyde the medallion, to which then the system, the memory control that he has goes off. Ronnie's father stops doing press-ups. Clyde remembers everything. I really like how we see like characters throughout that we've seen, because there's one earlier scene, he takes a really expensive car from a car owner, and he tells him to give it to me for free. And we cut to him, and you see the influence basically disappearing from him, and he's just like, where's the car? That story has some really great funny moments like that. And so we have this really, really strong scene at the end where Clyde is sitting down with his parents, as everybody's basically like giving him space, and Clyde was just like, I can use this to make you stay together. I can make my father stay, and you will not go. And so Clyde's father basically reveals that his partner, Clyde's auntie, is pregnant, and he came to Clive to basically remember how terrible of a father he was. And he was kind of getting nervous, and he was trying to like redeem himself before he gets a new kid. And Clyde lets him disappear, and he makes his mother forget before throwing the medallion into the river to be lost for time, forevermore. We get this really gorgeous scene in the attic, which the story ends on, with Clyde and Sarah Jane talking to each other, and they're basically explaining like Clyde's relationship and what they do, and it's just brilliant. So anyway, that is The Mark of the Berserker. Overall, this is a really, really good story. I highly recommend it. Brilliantly written. It's absolutely hilarious, with some really great tense scenes played out through the story. It's paced phenomenally well. The directing by Josh Agnew is gorgeous, putting us focusing on what we need, and I love some of the cuts that it does to certain characters' reactions. All perfectly timed. Easily Daniel Anthony's best performance as Clyde. Easily one of the best Clyde stories that we've tackled by so far. And by far, I think it's my second favourite Sarah Jane story so far in the series. So, high praise, although, like I said, Sarah Jane is hardly in it. And that one scene in which Clyde's father is almost totally in the influence of the Berserker medallion is kind of way too corny for what the story is doing. But apart from them, this story is pretty much perfect. So highly recommended. Go watch it. I would even actually recommend starting the series. If you've got like if you want to get into the series, but you don't really want to start at the very beginning, maybe give the Mark of the Berserker a try. Really good story, and shows how great a spin-off to the Sarah Jane Adventures is. So anyway, that's Mark of the Berserker. So join me next time when Sarah Jane has something to do and has to go back in the past, where she has an interaction with her parents. So join me next time for The Temptation of Sarah Jane Smith. And I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra!